Improving at Valorant, something we all strive towards, and yet something that can feel so hard at times. Have you ever told yourself it's time to improve your aim and concentrated as hard as you could on making the correct aim adjustments in each fight? Only to find that the exact opposite happened and you couldn't seem to hit a shot? Why is it that the more we try to improve on something, the less likely it seems to be that we are actually able to improve? Could it be that we have forgotten how improvement and learning a skill actually works? I personally think so, and I'm going to introduce an entirely different angle on how you can become the best version of yourself as a player. Just as a disclaimer, these ideas are not originally my own, but I learned about them from a book called The Inner Game of Tennis by Timothy Gallwey, which I highly recommend you to read. So now, let me introduce you to the Inner Game of Valorant. In order to understand the phenomenon of why we tend to play worse the harder we try to focus on playing well, we need to first understand that there are two selves at work when playing. Self 1 is our conscious self. It's the one that can say, I need to improve my aim, because you looked at your inside spider chart and saw that this seems to be your weakness. Or during a game, Self 1 could decide, I will play B this round because I think the enemy team will go there. Self 2 on the other hand is your unconscious self, the one that manages all the little things going on without you having to think about them actively. Like moving your mouse around while aiming, which takes hundreds if not thousands of muscles to work in unison. Or controlling your eyes to make sure that they stay on target or flick up to the minimap every time you have a chance to do so. And breathing while you do all that, and trying to deal with all the sugar in your system from the third soda you just popped during this play session. Alright, conscious self and unconscious self. Now let's stay at the example of trying to improve our aim. What happens when we try to over-focus on our aim and improve a specific aspect of it? Let's say we want to stay more loose and relaxed while aiming. This is a conscious thought, and so Self 1 is leaving its field of expertise and trying to do Self 2's job. You are forcing yourself to aim relaxed, and what happens is that you're not using enough muscles when aiming now, and so your adjustments become slow and sluggish. The same goes the other way around. You tell yourself you need to flick faster and with more tension. Now you will try to actively engage more muscles, and you will without a doubt overshoot it and become too stiff, so your aim gets shaky and loses its smoothness. Now let's compare that to a moment when you felt like you were in the zone. You weren't actively thinking about your aim at all, and suddenly an enemy peeked you from an angle you didn't expect, and without any effort you flicked onto his head to the point where you were surprised by your own aiming abilities. That was Self 2 doing its job and effortlessly controlling the exact right amount of muscles that needed to be engaged for that flick. So the problem should become clear now. When we allow Self 1 to interfere with Self 2's job, problems arise. We try to force things, we tense up, we lose trust in our effortless abilities. And the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish happens, causing frustration, which causes even more attempt to force things, and soon this turns into a vicious cycle. So what we need to learn in order to start improving naturally is to hold Self 1 back and have it stay in its lane. You need to learn to trust Self 2 in doing its job. Even Counter-Strike Pro and one of the best aimers in the world, Nico, said, if you are thinking about your aim, you are overthinking it. The first step in rewiring your thought process and your improvement approach is to stop judging yourself. We tend to constantly talk to ourselves in ways like, man, I can't aim for shit today, my crosshair placement is awful, or I need to be faster on my flicks, they are so slow. According to Timothy Gallwey, this is actually Self 1 talking to Self 2, and not in a nice way. You are constantly criticizing the part of yourself that is responsible for you becoming a good player. And most likely that will lead to you losing confidence in yourself and Self 2 not being able to do its job properly. So stop providing a meaning to every outcome. You missed a shot, stop labeling that as bad. You simply missed, and there was a reason for it that you can observe, and so there is a learning opportunity here. The same goes the other way around. You hit a nice shot. Stop giving yourself credit that you did something specifically well. That's Self-1's ego taking credit. I cannot tell you how many times I fell for that trap already. I experimented with a new mouse grip, a new aiming style, different tension when aiming or whatever, and I started to see positive results. Immediately I thought I had found that one magic fix and I was doing something right. Soon enough I started forcing that specific thing and my aim seemed to stop working again. So learn to observe instead. When I'm tracking an enemy, my crosshair seems to trail behind. I have difficulties trying to hit enemies that are strafing side to side. When I try to land difficult shots, I stop moving and become an easy target. Tell yourself these observations in a neutral way and watch them fixing themselves. Watch them fixing themselves? Nah, that's BS, you might say now. If I don't focus on doing something different with my aim, how am I supposed to improve then? Well, what if I told you that you learned many skills and improved on many things already in your life without that active Self-1 focus? Let's take learning to walk. You were a baby, you didn't actively think about shit. You crawled, then you started making a few steps and you fell. And you didn't tell yourself, man, I suck at walking. And surely your mom didn't tell you, honey, you need to put the left foot a little bit more in front in order to keep your balance. Nope, none of that happened. Do you know what happened? You unconsciously figured out what went wrong the last time, and the next time you tried to walk, your body adjusted on its own. And some mistakes and faults later, you started making a few steps and eventually learned to walk. Once we become conscious, we tend to try and do everything consciously. With learning skills and improving, we need to unlearn that habit. It is fine to reflect on your game and think about which general area you want to improve at to find some focus. Which, once again, I recommend our free improvement tool Insight for. It's an amazing way to analyze your game and get tips specifically tailored towards your game style. But then, once you get to the actual practice, you need to let things happen and learn how to improve naturally. Let me give you some concrete tips on how to make that possible. Visual cues are much better for Self-2 than giving it instructions. Have you ever experienced how you were much better at Valorant or even at doing a certain sport after you watch professionals play? That's because you take in visual cues of what they are doing well without even realizing it. So try watching pros aim in-game or play aim trainers and observe what they are doing. Then try to imitate that when practicing. You don't need to tell yourself, I need to flick fast and then stop without shaking and then micro-adjust by doing a very fine movement and all of that stuff. Just try to replicate what you saw. That leads me to my second point. Provide Self-2 with a task and then let it get there on its own. Let's move away from aiming as an example and talk about movement instead. Tell yourself you want to become a hard target to hit and move unpredictably. And then let yourself play. Let yourself experiment with different types of peaks and movement patterns when strafing. Get a feeling for when crouching seems useful and when it seems to make you an easy target. It's important you don't force this stuff and overcomplicate it once again. Just play and observe the changes that take place and that you make in your movement, and then take in what seems useful and what doesn't. Finally, a great exercise which you can do when practicing is to get into a deathmatch and imagine you are your favorite pro player and you play like him. A compilation is going to be made and they only use the good clips anyways, so it doesn't matter if you hit your shots or not. Let's say you choose 10s. All that matters is that you play like him. Fast flicks, crazy one-taps, little strafes in between shooting. Have fun with it. Imagine yourself having some of the best aim in the world, and you don't care if you hit your shots in the beginning or not, you know you're a pro, you have confidence. If you do this exercise right, you will soon find yourself hitting nice shots and aiming above your usual level. It's something you probably won't believe from just hearing about it, you have to experience it for yourself. So, we have basically established that you need to start letting yourself play and letting yourself improve, by giving Self-2 room to do its thing and keeping Self-1 out of there. However, this is much easier said than done because Self-1 is great at trying to make things conscious and getting itself back into the picture. So I want to give you a couple of tips on how you can increase your concentration and get into the zone more often. Giving Self-1 a task to occupy your mind and keep it busy is a great way to improve concentration. One of the tips Timothy Gallwey gave for tennis was to focus on the ball. I think that transfers very well to Valorant, where you should be focusing on the target. This will not only keep your mind distracted from focusing on your aim, but it will also allow you to aim better because you absorb more information about the target when actively focusing on it compared to just looking at it. However, forcing focus on something for a prolonged period of time once again doesn't work so well. So what I recommend is to take a more childlike interest into the game. Be curious about how the enemy moves on your screen, what type of strafe or peek he's using, how his head moves when he crouches, and so on. There is a massive difference between getting frustrated about an enemy crouching or doing a wide peek compared to observing with interest how that caused you to miss your shots. This might sound cliche, but honestly it's a privilege that you can sit here and play Valorant and do something that fun. Treat it like a child that actually has fun doing that fun thing, instead of getting frustrated over it like an idiot. Finally, I want to talk about staying in the zone in between rounds, because that is the time where your thoughts can drift and you can start reflecting on things. Man, I'm 1 in 5, this is not my game, or this enemy Reyna is shitting on me. It's clear that these are not helpful thoughts in terms of your performance, so instead I would recommend to keep yourself one busy by focusing on useful things. What buy is the enemy team on next round? Could they have an op? What can I buy? How are they playing and how can I adjust my strategy to it? Try to stay in the game and in the zone as much as you can. Reflecting you can keep for afterwards. Shout out to Timothy Gallwey for his amazing book. It really changed my perspective on the game and the many flaws I had in terms of my improvement approach and that I still have, so just gotta keep working on it. If you want to know more about how to improve your aim, I would highly recommend the playlist that is linked right here. I'll see you there.